In order to reduce the latency of cloud applications for your customers, Google is going to open a new region in Spain. So you'll be able to deploy your application, store your data, etc. in region which is as close as possible to your end users. So your customers will have very low latency, and also, of course, in terms of performance, it's going to be faster because it's closer, and higher availability in general because, again, you're going to be closer to your application and your customers. So the pandemic situation actually didn't impact latency negatively, in the sense that in spite of remote working, homeschooling, online shopping that has increased, the cloud providers, and in particular Google Cloud, continue to improve the bandwidth that is available, upgrade the hardware to the latest technologies, etc. So on the contrary, I would say it's a positive impact ultimately for your customers. In order to avoid extra latency, you have to also adapt to the new processes. For example, if you're deploying more frequently, you have to follow some certain patterns and best practices that perhaps you were not using before. And also things like the way you're going to test your application, develop, deploy it more rapidly with a smaller cycle. It's also important to adapt to this in order to not add extra latency compared to what the cloud provider already provides. The three key benefits of serverless computing are the fact that it's the fastest way to get an idea to production in no time. You just focus on your business concerns and you deploy this idea directly. The fact that the infrastructure is fully managed for you. You don't have to focus on this and worry that there's going to be a hardware failure somewhere. And last but not least, I would say that the automatic and transparent scaling is a key aspect of serverless computing, because if you're featured on primetime TV, there's a high peak of traffic, the infrastructure is going to handle that traffic for you. And then once the traffic is going away, it's going to reduce down back to zero or almost zero, so it's not going to cost you too much money. It's essential that the cloud provider is taking care of the infrastructure and hardware for serverless computing, because that's the way you, the customer, you're going to be able to focus on your application, on your business concerns, rather than focusing on the serverless infrastructure, the hardware, etc. With serverless computing, the main challenge that customers are facing is to adapt to the new practices. For example, creating stateless applications instead of stateful. So you have to create new ways to deploy your solutions in the cloud in order to take advantage of all that is offered by serverless computing. To illustrate serverless computing at its best, as an example, I would take when you're featured on primetime TV. What happens? There's going to be a high peak of traffic on your application. How do you cope with that? With serverless computing, the elasticity of scaling, it's going to scale up transparently without you having to worry about it or provision anything. So it's the best way to scale without too much worry about the infrastructure.